com. I'm Gary Hess, News Radio WRVA, the voice of Virginia.
Rich Herrera loves this country and isn't afraid to say it.
This is Richmond's Morning News with Rich Herrera on News Radio WRVA.
All right, thanks for joining us, everybody. 8:34 this morning on News Radio WRVA. So yesterday on the program, we were reporting that the president had decided we were going to be the guardians of the Strait of Hormuz. And we were also going to charge a 20% fee for ships navigating through the strait to offset the cost of our presence and to ensure their safety going through the strait. The president, after a couple hours and some telephone calls from allies in the area, has reversed course on that. It will still be the guardian, but those countries said, Mr. President, how about we just do more business together? We'll have more investments. Nonetheless, the United States Navy will now ensure the traffic through the strait. Now, whether Lloyd's of London comes along or not, I don't know. But the Iranians say, no, we will control who gets to go through the Strait of Hormuz. The MOU's basically dead. The ceasefire is basically dead. And the president's saying now, well, you guys are going to mess around and you're going to find out, because next week we're going to turn it up even more. So where are we right now? Let's go out to the WRVA Newsmaker Hotline for the American First Policy Institute. Jacob Olidort is joining us here on News Radio WRVA. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Did I get the synopsis right of where we've been? It's been a quick 24 hours.
Yeah, well, and I think so much of this, of course, is, separating the forest from the trees on what's actually going on. Look, I think the unglamorous but most important narrative piece here that's missing is that the president is involved in the very thankless but important work of coalition building. And so whatever happens, do we charge this amount or that amount, and which countries, all of that is working towards a longer term objective, of course, of having, much like everywhere else in the world, our allies and partners take more ownership over this, over their regions than we should. And I think that's the bottom line. And obviously, if we do it on our terms, in terms really that promote peace, that is all the better. But, the other corrective, if I may, there is this narrative out there that all of a sudden the strait has become vulnerable. And, Lloyd's of London, everybody has been understanding that the Strait of Hormuz has been vulnerable to Iranian threats for decades. The tanker wars in the 80s, when 25% of maritime traffic went down because of Iranian firing. This is not new. What we're actually doing is creating conditions for an unprecedented stability in this waterway by eradicating the military threat from the regime. And I think that's a key piece of this.
So in our local newspaper, and if I have time, I'm going to get to this today, is a dopey take on what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. Like all of a sudden now the president got this thing all gummed up. It wasn't gummed up before, but we've had history with Iran threatening shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. We go back to the tanker wars. So there is precedent that they've always had their fingers around the throat of the Strait of Hormuz and have always been a threat to international shipping.
That's exactly right. And look, the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, they're doing now, this is their last-ditch effort. This is all that they've got left in their military arsenal as far as immediate escalation. The other piece of this, look, other partners have identified and are already using other routes to transmit energy. The Saudis and the Emiratis have 2 land routes to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. Our partners are aware of this. They've been making plans for many years to try to avoid this high-risk waterway. Now, the question becomes, if we as the United States, through our successes, eliminate or at least mitigate the risks, how will private companies respond? I mean, that is an individual decision for every company. But the bottom line is what we're doing is leading towards that end state. That hasn't been the case for 5 decades.
So my son is home. He's a poli-sci major. He's going to the Marine Corps next year, hoping to be an intelligence officer. So he and I will just chat and discuss that. That's what we talk about. I don't know if anybody else talks about that with their kid. But when we first saw that, he's going to charge 20%, it sounded almost like a tariff when you read the headlines. And then when you boil it down, he's asking the shipping companies to defer the cost of having the U.S. Navy in there and the cost that's associated with this freedom of navigation through and it's not international waters, but it's an international transit way. Okay, that makes more difference. And then Iran comes back and says, oh, so taxing people a toll to come through the strait, we think it's a good idea as well. These two are not the same. The U.S. is going to do what versus what Iran's intentions were.
That's right. And first of all, I commend you and your family. That's incredible to hear. I think, the cost, where the ledger is, one fuzzy math, if I may. I mean, maybe the toll compared to the insurance premiums, which has been a toll to companies for decades, maybe then on the net that's less. But I think, all of these measures right now are short term, and we're trying to figure out really how do we get to this end state where our allies and partners shoulder kind of a longer term responsibility for this waterway. However that's addressed in the interim period, and we don't know the extent of it, I think that will be, as you said, we're kind of in these 24-hour news cycles to determine.
Yeah, and then again, I haven't done the research on this. The Lloyd's of London thing was which was the linchpin that kind of threw all this upside down when they stopped issuing certificates of insurance to go through there. That's really a toll that's taken on because of the threat, not just from getting through that waterway, but from the Houthis and everybody else that was endangering those $150 million tankers and the $150 million of cargo that really shut all this down. I wanted to ask you, where are we right now? Negotiations versus where Donald Trump says, listen, guys, I'm warning you, and I'm warning you, if you don't get back to the table, we have legitimate negotiations. The power plants that are dual use, the bridges that are dual use, military and civilian, those are coming down. Is Iran going to respond to that, in your opinion?
Right. So where we are, I mean, whether or not they respond and how, it depends, I think, on the holistic, form of pressure we place. I do think those are fair game. I mean, those are dual use. They've used it to hide their missiles. There's documentation of it now. I don't know whether that's where the president and his team are looking, but certainly in my mind, reasonable. But, I think right now, the bottom line is we have time on our hands to continue managing the conditions on the ground. One thing that's for certain is that the immediate nature of the threat, as it looked, in May 2025, or June 2025, before Midnight Hammer, has been eliminated. And there's documentation of that Iran cannot ramp up its nuclear and even ballistic capabilities in the way that it used to. That's a huge game changer. Its command and control is significantly diminished, and there's a lot of probably chaos in the upper ranks of different voices. That's a net good thing for us because that's their credibility among their own folks. But the other thing I think is looking at where we want to leave Iran going forward. I mean, we have, again, the next 2+ years to really continue pushing this in a certain direction. And I think that is, in my view, how to view this issue while we are actually shaping conditions elsewhere in the region. And there I bring up the Israel-Lebanon negotiations, Iraq. We had the prime minister in the Oval Office yesterday. I mean, there's a lot of silver linings there. He's rooting out corruption. Syria, I know, is a little bit more contentious, but the intent is the same, to kind of change the leaf. All of these are pressure points on the Iranian regime. That is their, kind of playing field, if you will, for their terror architecture. And so as we are diminishing that, we are shifting the conditions on the ground to make them increasingly, or rather decreasingly, more potent as a threat. And I think that is the ultimate objective here.
The one thing that, and we've had conversations and listeners have chastised me, we need to arm the locals. We need to arm the people. We need to figure a way to get arms in there so the people can overthrow this theocratic regime. I know the diaspora of Iranians here keep saying the people are going to rise up. Are we still waiting and hoping for that? Because the way I look at it, and we're talking with Jacob Olidort from American First Policy Institute, they rose up. Right now, their inflation's out of control. Their economy's crashing. They rose up, but 50,000 of them were killed by the IRGC, just trying to arm civilians that I don't think there's a militia. I don't think that there's an armed a resistance out there that's ready to take on the IRGC. Is that a fair hope that they could rise up without arms against a pretty ruthless IRGC?
It's an incredibly noble hope it's not, and it never has been, a U.S. objective. And I think that's been an important distinction the president has been making consistently. I mean, he's always acknowledged that could be a scenario. But, there's a fact here. And of course, the arrangements you describe, any of that, can be plausible. But the reality, of course, this could be a generational thing rather than an overnight thing. I mean, for the simple fact, if you look at Khamenei's funeral, last couple of days, those are all regime supporters. And so, and it's a big country, and of course, there are a lot of global equities at stake in whatever happens. Now, with that being said, with our achieving our military objectives, as we've stated them on February 28th with Epic Fury, reducing the threats to the American people, we are actively shaping conditions on the ground that are more favorable to opponents of the regime. And so I think there is kind of a Venn diagram there. But I mean, I think for us, it's important in the moment, and certainly as we continue and conveying the message to the American people, the objective remains and will be to eliminate the threats from the regime. And so I think that's kind of where we are and the direction, as I see it, where we're headed.
Okay, so just so I make sure I'm on the same page with you, and we call it's called mission creep. When you have a mission, then you start kind of listing this way and listing that way. The mission's always been they can't have a bomb, and then once they cut off the Strait of Hormuz, we must have open waterways. That's the mission. Anything else will be mission creep, and I'm not sure the administration's actually had a stated goal of anything else other than those two things, with number one being they can't have a nuke.
I think that's right. I would just change the order a little bit. I would also add in, the nuke, I would say the ballistic missiles and the military capabilities and the terror network. And then the Strait of Hormuz, I always think of as a secondary, ancillary effect of those military objectives. It's a situation, but it's never been part of the original objective. It's
like the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge and the Ardennes Forest was never one of the Allied battle plans they had. It developed in the middle of this, and then they had to make sure that they defended that, send Patton in there to rescue the army, but it was never part of the plan originally of what they were going to do during World War II. Things happen.
Or rather, it was always part of the planning, but it was never the state objective.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it was always a factor. But yeah, I think we will achieve all of those. And certainly, as I mentioned, I'm very bullish on the Strait as well, of being in even today, a more stable place than it was, 5 months ago, for the simple fact that the risk has been mitigated. And so, yeah, I think that's right.
Jacob, I appreciate. Listen, I know that you get a bazillion calls of people that want you to come on radio and TV. The fact that you take time for us and you help explain this and help me understand, help our listeners understand, is always appreciated. I just want to make sure I told you that on air. We do appreciate you taking time joining us and educating us and letting us know what's really going on beyond the headlines.
That's very kind, and it's a real privilege to hear from your listeners and to talk. So anytime, glad to be back.
Absolutely. If you want to find out more, go to americafirstpolicy.com. Jacob, I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. So that's kind of the bottom line where we are right now. And the Iranians, again, I'm not sure if they know who's negotiating on what behalf, but the president told him, if you don't come back to the table, we make significant progress by next week. A lot of these other infrastructure things are coming down, and the choice is yours. All right, today's program brought to you in part by A+ Windows.